What is happening, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. We are presented by Jack O'Hara TV. Like, comment, and subscribe on our YouTube channel at Jack O'Hara TV. We're also presented by TickPick.com. You ever hear of TickPick.com, Carlos?
I have not.
So TickPick.com is a ticket marketplace that allows no hidden fees for your tickets. So Super Bowl 57's in the area this year. We got the Waste Management Open. You were mentioning Barrett Jackson had an event tonight. That's why you're almost late with traffic, which is so annoying. But TickPick has been generous enough to give us a $20 off code, which is capital OSHOW 20, OSHOW 20 for $20 off your next order. TickPick.com. No hidden fees for tickets. So if you wanted to go to StubHub.com, they would have had a $30 service charge on top of whatever you ordered. So Super Bowl tickets are going to be roughly in the range of $2,500 to $3,000 a pop. You'll have at least a couple $100 in service fees added on if you go to a Ticketmaster or a SeatGeek or a StubHub. We're at TickPick.com. They tell you straight up what it is, full transparency. So use that promo code to get $20 off your next order. We're also brought to you by Rack Financial Merchant Services, the #1 credit card processing company in the state of Arizona, here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Come see your results with us here at Rack Financial. Head on over to rackfinancial.com to become an affiliate or an agent. We got a doctor in the house. Carlos, thanks so much for joining us today.
Of course. Happy to be here.
So do you get to pick your own hours, or are you kind of all over the place? I can imagine you're a very, very busy man with everything that you got going on.
It's true. You can pick your own hours, but the reality is people want to have surgery during normal working hours versus you're like, yeah, let's have surgery at 7 p.m. I mean, it's possible, but I don't know if I could convince my staff to be like, great, let's start surgery at 7 p.m.
I couldn't imagine so. I wouldn't imagine wanting to get surgery at 7 p.m.
You'd be surprised. There's actually surgery centers or places where people go have surgery that literally work 24/7, meaning they're running surgeries from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., which are kind of traditional hours. And then they give discounts for people who want to have surgery, like let's say at 1 a.m. Yeah. Because if you're trying to run a business, if you run it 24/7, you can still generate money.
Ooh, interesting. And are you coming straight from the office?
I am. I literally just finished seeing my surgery patient for tomorrow who flew from New Mexico to come see me.
See, that's what Mike was telling me when we were on the phone yesterday, is that people come over from all over the place. The UK, Miami, very close with Dr. Miami as well. Like, just well-connected individual with a lot of clientele from all over the place, right?
Yes. I mean, it still blows my mind that somebody's like, I had a patient fly from Japan, Okinawa, and I'm like, you want to come all the way from over there and take how many flights to come have surgery by me? And they're like, yes, I'm super excited. And I was like, okay, happy to help you.
That is like a 14 to 17 hour flight, my friend.
Yes, it's insane.
Do you ever feel pressure when it comes to certain surgeries or certain like expectations of people of what they want?
I think when you decide to become a plastic surgeon, it's kind of built into the job.
Yeah.
You know, there's no way somebody's going to pay you money and expect you not to deliver on what you said you're going to do.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say it's pressure, but I can't remember the last time I felt under pressure.
Has there ever been an instance where they weren't happy with a specific surgery?
Oh, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. I mean, we're all human. And the hardest part, I think, for people to kind of understand sometimes is it's not like making a car where all the parts are exactly the same and you're just putting them together. You're getting used parts. You're getting some parts that are broken. You're getting some parts that are new, so to speak. But yeah, I mean, having people that are unhappy is part of anything in life. Yeah. Just like I'm sure you have people that come on here and they're like, yeah, I didn't like doing this, versus other people like, oh my God, this is like the greatest thing ever. So when it comes to patients, it's far and few in between. But yes, I have patients that are unhappy.
And I'm sure like within not just your clientele, but the people that you are connected with, they've had similar stories. So you can bounce ideas off of them and be like, yeah, I've been there before, you know, you just got to brush it off. And here's some advice I have for you. Here's some other things. Like when you were first getting into the practice, like, did you have like a wide variety of people that you could reach out to? Not necessarily like mentor from, but people that you could seek advice from?
Not as many as you would think. Because usually the funny thing about plastic surgery, it's kind of like a dog-eat-dog world, right? It's everybody's still running a business, trying to look out for themselves. But usually the people that you can reach out to are people that you train with, or old professors, or people that you've come across to in meetings, that you can be like, hey, I had this happen. What do you think, could be done differently? But part of everything that we do is about expectation, right? We set the expectation of the circumstances and being like, hey, I can get you from, let's say, a 60% result to like an 85%. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's great. But those people that are at 85, like, I want a 99. So it's the reality of stuff that if you do a good job at the front end, meaning setting realistic expectations, most people end up being happy. And when you show them the before and afters, they can see a difference.
Mm-hmm. I just had a show earlier today with someone who works with this company, Rack Financial, talking about win-win scenarios. You always want to have like a win-win partnership with your clients, the people that you're doing business with, consumers, customers, whatever. Do you feel like it's very important to provide that value as best as you possibly can? Obviously, there are times where it just doesn't work out, but like, do you have that, moral value that says like, if I do the right thing here and I give them exactly what they want, and provided that I'm seeking value in this too, but that's how you build relationships with people. That's how you're going to like almost get them to come back. Do you feel that way?
I absolutely couldn't agree with you more on that from that standpoint. Everything that I do in my office is about doing the right thing. If that means sometimes people come see me and their expectation is so unrealistic that I say, I just can't help you. And sometimes they actually respect you more for telling them no than you taking their money, telling them yes, and them being unhappy. The funny part about those particular patients is they end up finding somebody else who makes them unhappy, takes their money, and then they have back in my office and like, hey, can you fix me now? And I'm like, I can do my best.
Yeah. And then that's when you're like, man, I made the right call, because now they trust you more than they trust, this guy over here that took advantage of them and took their money and just did the wrong thing. Yeah. Ethically and morally.
And that's kind of the hardest part, because nobody, I think, at least from my standpoint, nobody in medicine tries to take care of somebody who they don't think they're going to make better.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that that's the way things always play out. But part of that is doing the right thing. And if that means saying no, then say no.
And that comes from probably a pretty good upbringing and surrounding yourself with a great community of people that kind of had those ethics and beliefs, right? Like, do you take away anything? Like, was there anybody specific growing up that kind of instilled that in you?
I would say my parents, from that standpoint, they were very good people that try to do the right thing. My mom was a teacher growing up, taught like middle school and like do your homework kind of stuff. And my dad was an electrical engineer, but he wasn't really around that much. But when he was, it was always just be a better person. And I think when you go into medicine, your altruism kind of takes over and you're like, hey, I just want to help people. And yes, plastic surgery, you help people when you make money, just like any profession. But it's more about doing the right thing, helping people, and worrying about the money second.
So what was the journey there? Because I know it's kind of been a wild ride. Like growing up, first, dreams, aspirations you ever had, getting, being 18, early 20s, mid 20s, there's like, what kind of got you to what you're doing today? Because you're very good at it and you got a huge platform as well to go with it, which is not easy to do, by the way, especially in this day and age. But like, how did you get there? Like, what were some of the certain things that you wanted to do growing up, all the detours that, the good Lord kind of put you through, and how you got to where you are today?
Growing up, I never thought I would be a doctor. It wasn't a thing, but it was a specific event when I was with my mom and she was going to night school trying to get her PhD in education. And I would go with her after, she'd pick us up and she had to go to class. And so I'd sit in the library, do my homework and stuff. And we were walking back to the car after, her classes. And I was like, oh, I forgot something. We were walking across. It was kind of raining. So I was like running back to the library to get something. And when I turned around, my mom got hit by a car. And literally, they didn't see her. It hit her, and like she flew literally like 30 feet in the air, like the movies. And I was like 15, and I'm running to her, looking at her, and I didn't know what to do. I was literally like, scared, SHIT kind of thing, less. And I felt so helpless, and I had to sit there and wait. Thank God my mom was okay, but she has chronic issues with arthritis, with her jaw, because she kind of broke it, and And I felt extremely helpless. And that was the first time that I was like, I never want to feel like this again.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of started my drive to go into medicine. And I graduated high school, finished, in the top 10%, went to Texas A&M, busted my rear end studying, knowing that and I'm sure things are different, but when I was applying, for every 4 people that applied, only 1 person got into med school. And I had 3 good friends and me, and I was the only one to actually get accepted. And I always say I probably got in because I was brown. So maybe because of my ethnicity, maybe they're like, hey, we're going to help this Hispanic kid out, whatever. But I got to med school. I busted my rear end again, and I managed to graduate in the top 10% of my class. And, it's not a small feat, but I was very proud of myself. But to make matters even more challenging, I was like, well, I think I want to be a plastic surgeon, right? And plastic surgery when you're in med school is kind of like a unicorn. Mm-hmm. They're far and few between. And nowadays, it's like everyone's like, I want to be a plastic surgeon. Why? Because I see it on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Facebook. Everyone's like, I want to be a plastic surgeon. But going through med school, there's 1,000 people that apply a year. There's 85 spots in the country. That's it.
Yeah.
85. And that is probably the lowest. Like neurosurgery has like 150 spots. Dermatology has like 300 spots. Plastic surgery, 85. It's one of the fewest specialties you can get into straight out of med school. There's other ways to become a plastic surgeon where you have to do more school, more training, but straight out of med school, there was 85 spots in the country to get in. Somehow or other, I managed to get one of those, and the rest is kind of just history and continuing to bust my rear end.
I mean, it's crazy how few and far between there are people that get accepted in those jobs. Like 85 people in the 85 country. People in the country.
Out of 1,000 people. And the worst part about those 1,000 people is they're all more than qualified. Yeah. For example, we have to take tests, right? On a scale of 1 to 99, in order for your application to be viewed, if you don't have a 99, your application won't even be viewed. So it's like you almost have to score perfect on that test just for them to look at your application, because there's filters like, you have a 98. Some people may look at you, but most places, it's not a 99. No. Like your application, it doesn't matter if you brought people back from the dead. Just based on that number, you wouldn't even get interviewed.
Interesting.
And again, those are the I don't know how to put it. That's the criteria that's required now versus when I interviewed with most of the people, whether I interviewed at Harvard or Yale or Stanford for plastic surgery, those kind of programs, they're like, I wouldn't get in now if I was applying. And these are plastic surgeons that are asking interviewees that want to be plastic surgeons. They're like, yeah, I wouldn't get in. There were people that had NIH grants or been doing research for years and years. And I was like, little old me hadn't done some stuff, but nowhere near where some of the people that I interviewed with that I was like, oh, this person's going to get in easily over me. But somehow or other, just, I guess they didn't interview well or whatever the circumstances. But I guess, the cards fell in the right place for me.
And how long before your first ever surgery? Like, was there like a lot of precautions, a lot of training you had to go through, or were you kind of thrown right into the fire?
Yes and no. I think from the standpoint of first surgery, you go through med school, which is 4 years. And then after that, you're a doctor. You can literally call yourself doctor. You have a medical degree. You can't practice by yourself, but you can go and do more training, which is called internship and then residency and fellowship. So as an intern, you're like, great, I'm a doctor. I went through 4 years in med school, and you show up and somebody says, I have XYZ, and you're like, I think I know what's going on, but you don't know. You have to run tests and this and that. But as a surgeon, like, you're asking, when's your first surgery? And you're always like, okay, great. Are they going to let me? I still remember the first time somebody like said, here's the knife, go ahead and cut. And you're like, whoo-wee, this person's alive. It's not like practicing on a chicken or a pig's feet or anything like that. It's a real human being that's under anesthesia, and you're sitting here, and that's a thrill. Like the first time, because again, and the crazy part about surgery is like you don't do plastic surgery right away. You go in and you have to learn the fundamentals of just all surgery, and then you specialize, right? Mm-hmm. So the first time you get to cut on a person, it's kind of a thing. But once I got older and I was more senior, about to graduate, every time I'd have a med student, I'd be like, okay, here you go. And I'd be like, all right, this is how you're going to cut. And I would let them cut. And I still have some people that reach out to me on Facebook. I still never forgot the first time you handed me the scalpel and said, and you gave me the opportunity, because it wasn't a thing but I always felt like if somebody took a chance on me, I'm willing to take a chance on them. And obviously I wouldn't let them do something that was going to hurt somebody, but it was one of those things that I was literally right there and like almost guiding their hand. But just that sense of feeling is like, wow.
Now, are the jobs as few and far between now as they were back then when you first got in?
I think they're a little different, but I think the percentage is still super, super small. I think there's a couple more spots, like maybe like 105, somewhere around there, not like 200 or anything like that.
Now, how often are people getting surgery for things that they want altered as opposed to things that they needed altered? Because I feel like that could vary too when it comes to like pressure on you, because there's certain things that people need in order to feel comfortable as opposed to like, oh, I just want to get, something done with my nose, clean something up, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it's hard to quantify that because I can only speak to what I see, but it's plastic and reconstructive surgery, not just plastic surgery. And plastics in Greek means to mold, to shape. So part of that is plastic surgeons are the few specialties where you would say that if people know anything about plastic surgeons are a surgeon's surgeon. And what that typically means is that when other surgical specialties, whether it's neurosurgeon, ENT, urology, general surgeon, vascular surgery, if they have an issue, they actually call a plastic surgeon to come in and help them fix part of those problems. So plastic surgery is one of the few specialties where you can literally operate from the top of your head all the way down to your feet. And everything that we do in terms of fundamentals, cosmetic surgery or plastic surgery, as people see it, is maybe like 10% of what we know.
Yeah.
So it's very limited, but it's all the other stuff that we know that, as I explain to people, if I can make something from nothing, when you give me something, it's far easier to work with that than nothing. So
how often do you deny potential people who come in and say, I want to get something done here? Because again, like you said before, it's like you'd rather be ethical and be like, I can't work with you because it's going to do this, that, and that, as opposed to just taking their money and running with it.
I would say probably less than 5% of the time, because most of the times the more seasoned you get or the older you get, for example, you could probably interview anybody today with your eyes closed, right? Because you've been doing this a while, versus at the beginning, you're like, oh man, I'm kind of nervous about interviewing.
Question, answer. I'm thinking about the next question as you're answering.
Versus now it's just a fluid conversation. You don't even think twice about whoever is sitting in your chair. It's the same thing with surgery. The more surgery you do, the more comfortable you become. And 40-50% of my practice now is taking on patients who've had bad outcomes or bad surgeries by somebody else. So it's a lot harder to fix those. And most people don't want to do that because you're putting your hands in a messy situation.
Yeah.
So you have to be self-confident and comfortable in your abilities that you can fix those things.
So it's much easier to work on people who have never gotten surgery before.
Absolutely.
Because like, what are you specifically like getting yourself into, to kind of put it in kind of layman's terms for someone who's never even experienced anything like that? Like, what's the difference between someone who's never gotten surgery and someone because I'm sure you've operated on like the same body part for both, where it's like, oh, this is new territory. This is just a complete mess, and I'm going to have to figure it out.
I'll give you a really simple example. When somebody has never had surgery, it's like taking a stick of butter at room temperature with a hot knife. Cuts right through it. Piece of cake, right? Now you take that same knife, regardless of whether it's hot or cold, and you take that stick of butter and take it out of the freezer. Now try to cut it. And now you're literally creating little shavings, but your job is to create a perfectly straight line.
Yeah.
That's the difference of how easy it is compared to no surgery, compared to previous surgery.
That's difficult. And that's what you're specifically kind of in right now?
Yeah. I mean, when I first started, it's hard when you first start and you're like, gosh, come to my podcast and let me interview you. And you're like, I don't know who you are.
Exactly.
So it's hard to kind of break in, versus somebody who needs help is like, great, you're the only person willing to help me, then great. Or you're the only person willing to interview me, then great. And you're like, okay, great, I'll take it. And so when I first started, because I was in the military, I kind of skipped over that.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So I was in the military, so I took care of all kinds of mess from, whatever circumstances. So I got used to just dealing with issues. So when I was on my own, taking care of patients, I'm like, well, I I've done worse than this. So great.
Yeah.
I'll do my best to help you. So.
And that's the right attitude to have, in my opinion. Like, it's not like you looked at it as like, oh, I guess I just got to start here. It's like, oh, this is a great opportunity, no matter what it is, right?
Exactly. So I just took it with a grain of salt and kind of ran with it. And now it's like, I just do it.
So was it the Air Force?
I was stationed at Eglin Air Force Base, but actually I was a major in the United States Army.
Wow. Thank you for your service. When did that kind of become a reality for you? Because I have a buddy who just went into the Air Force, and it was almost like a calling for him. Like, he felt like, this is what I'm meant to do right now in my life.
I think for me, I had an uncle who was in the service, and he said it's about helping people. And for me, I was I was in college, and I was like, gosh, how am I going to afford $100,000 a year to pay for school? I'm like, I can't work a job that's going to pay me that much even nowadays. And I was, there was something on campus, and there was a recruiter like, hey, what do you think about the Army? And I was like, no, I'm going to med school. And he's like, hey, we need military doctors. And I started thinking, he's like, hey, we can help you pay for school. We can pay for all of it. And I was like, what? So all of a sudden, my ears perked up because I was like, great, what do I need to do to help myself? But I was like, great, they're going to help me. I'm going to help my country. And next thing I know, I'm signing a piece of paper at the age of 21 saying, hey, I'm going to be a military doctor.
Wow. And that's a young age to come to that, realization and that decision to be like, Mom, Dad, I'm going.
Yep.
That's not an easy thing for the family to take in. That's not an easy thing, no matter how many people say, like, yeah, it was my calling. That's not an easy thing for you to take in. Because on a day-to-day basis, you're going through things that most people don't go through on a daily basis. The pressure and the discipline it takes.
I mean, it was an eye-opening experience for sure when, you get in and, I didn't know anything about the military, but by the time I get in, I was an officer because I had graduated college and then I had graduated med school. It's a different environment. I never look back at that time and say, wow, I'm grateful for having gone through what I went through in the military and helping all the people that I could. From that standpoint, when I first started, within a month, I had a 9-month waiting list of people who needed surgery that I could help. I was taking care of people from Texas, Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and I was stationed in Florida. But I had literally people driving from military bases to come see me in the Panhandle of Florida at Eglin Air Force Base.
Wow. So a 9-month waiting list. Are these people that need surgery ASAP, or these people that can wait it out?
This was reconstructive.
Okay.
So reconstruction is not usually acute or right away. It's more like, okay, great, I've waited 2 years, but I'd rather have you do it. Because everybody of those people that waited had an option to say, I don't want to wait. I can go see somebody locally who's not in the military. But because they trusted the military system, they would rather wait.
Wow. Which is great news for you during that experience.
It gave me tons of experience.
And how many years did you serve?
4.
4 years, which is a perfect amount of time to kind of grow into that next level of your life. So you were out by 25?
Oh, no. I joined at 21. I didn't actually go into the service till about the age of 32.
Wow.
I was still in the service technically, but I was going through school, through the service.
Okay.
So, they help you pay for med school, and then you have to do additional training as internship residency.
I always forget about training. It's just like, oh, I'm not going in until, 5 years from now. I'm just training for the next 5 years. I'm like, oh, okay.
And then you start.
Yeah, because my buddy literally just shipped out about a year ago, and he's got 2 years of training before he can even get to the next stage, Yep. And I'm like, wow, that takes a lot of discipline.
And time, too.
And
but
a
yes,
lot of time.
Absolutely.
And again, thank you so much for your service there. And then you knowing what you wanted to do throughout that entire period and getting that experience, like what's kind of the vast difference there between what you're doing now and what you were doing then?
Well, what I was doing there was taking care of anything and everything that I felt I could help. I was doing procedures that other people didn't want to do for these individuals. And the crazy part about it is sometimes in plastic surgery, there's no textbook on this procedure. You're literally taking foundations and principles that and kind of pseudo making something up to make somebody more functional. Mm-hmm. I had this gentleman who was a wounded warrior, and part of his problem was that, he had a IED explode down there, and the doctors that took care of him overseas to stabilize him had to use part of his skin that, covers the two jelly beans down there.
Right.
And they had to attach it to his part that he uses for special activities. Right. I'm trying to be more PC here.
Absolutely.
And so, great, it survived, but now it wasn't functional because now it was kind of attached. Imagine like something about Mary or something like that.
I'm trying to imagine that.
And so my job was to kind of reconstruct it in a way where he could actually use it. So there's no like, great, follow this and do this. It's like taking principles of borrowing skin and moving it around to allow him to be more functional.
Wow. So on that note, what's the worst part of the body that you've operated on that you don't necessarily look forward to when you're going to the office?
I think probably one of the worst areas, is when I was doing training at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston, where, all they take care of is the worst of the worst when it comes to cancer, that some people have had cancer that's spread down to where number 2 comes out. And they literally have to cut this massive hole down there. And you're like, okay. And it's your job as a plastic surgeon to sit here and be like, you need to fix this and cover that up, because obviously stuff's going to come out through there. That's probably one of the more challenging issues, is that area down there, because it's so sensitive and functional, but yet such a hard place to kind of fill.
Oh my God. I couldn't imagine the pressure of that, knowing that like, okay, it's up to me now. Like they're going to look back at this surgery and be like, wow, like I'm recommending you to anybody else, or at the same time, like that's a tough thing to get over if it's not working.
I mean, and the worst part about it is most of these patients still need radiation. Yeah. Radiation sits here and fries your skin and makes things fall apart. So you have to do an exceptional job. And there's always going to be issues, but small issues is okay compared to big issues where all of a sudden there's another hole, or that hole doesn't heal, and now you got to find something else. So,
I mean, all of these different experiences, at what point did you not like take, like we mentioned, like taking bits and pieces from other people, kind of taking advice, mentorship, things like that. At what point were you starting to get referrals out the wazoo and kind of building, not only your network and your net worth, but kind of like your overall, reputation and platform in that sense?
I think at first it was really hard because, I knew lots of people in Florida, even Texas, where I did some of my training, or in Boston. But I literally moved out here and I didn't know too many people. And so part of that is I just kind of hung my shingle and said, hey, I'm here. And I did a little bit of surgery here and there, but it wasn't until I started doing social media, because the crazy part about Phoenix, it's one of the top 6 largest cities in the United States, right? Like massive. But yet when it came to social media, there was like almost nobody doing any of it back when I came in 2015.
Yeah.
So if you compared that in 2015 to like LA, Chicago, Miami, New York, there's like 500-600 people each all doing plastic surgery on social media. But when it came to Phoenix, like 0.
Yeah.
Like so limited that I became friends with Dr. Miami, and the rest was kind of history. I just started doing social media, and then that just allowed me to showcase what it is that I do. And then people are like, oh, hey, I'm interested. And that allowed our reach to be more than just local to, nearby states to, across the world.
Isn't it crazy how quickly social media can change things? Like you kind of saw an opportunity, like nobody out here really has this platform and what I do specifically and how I could provide value. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, like we finally have someone in this area.
Exactly.
It's amazing how many people you could reach on like one post too. Like you have no idea. You might start with like 3 followers, but like couple hundred people are going to see that post just because it's in the funnel. It's like in their feed. And all of a sudden things become residuals and it just grows and grows and grows and grows. And then you get to a point, like how quickly did it grow when you started social media in 2015? Because that's 8 years ago now?
Yeah. And it was slow at first because plastic surgery wasn't a thing on social media.
No. I always say that with it, like just business people who own, sales companies, tech companies, all over the place. Like a celebrity back in the day, people who was like a public figure, like actors, athletes, musicians, everybody else, which is kind of like
on it, but not on it.
Exactly.
And then somebody realized that, hey, I can monetize this. I can sit here and do something. and get more business. So why not?
Mm-hmm.
There were no guidelines that said you could do this or that. But it did take some time because, like I said, it's not for everybody.
Nope.
And again, I don't know who would sit here and watch me on Snapchat where it was like full surgery, like real life surgery, versus Instagram is certainly more tailored, more curated, more filtered. But even then, some people were all about it and other people were like, yeah, I don't really want to see that. So it took some time. But I think, for example, the patient that I'm operating on tomorrow, she flew from New Mexico and she's like, oh, I've been following you for 3 years. And I first found you when I was in New York.
Mm.
And now she lives in New Mexico. And literally, it took her 3 years to decide to make that decision. And so if I'm not sitting here providing content daily or whatever the circumstances, they're like, oh, I'll just find somebody else.
It's like 3 years of scouting almost. And
Exactly.
you're putting out the consistent content and proving day in and day out, like, okay, like this is the one I trust.
Correct.
Even though you've like never met him in person, this is the person I'm going to go with.
Absolutely. It's kind of insane. But part of that is, at least what people tell me, is it's the consistency. If I start something, I finish it. It's not like I'm doing surgery and like, oh, this doesn't look good, so let's just not finish it.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever I start, I finish. And so you get to see everything. So it's not like I'm cherry picking the good and the bad. It's like you get all of it.
Yeah.
So it's more, I would say, raw or as authentic as I can kind of make it.
And how do you kind of stay on top of everything social media wise? Obviously people have teams, everybody, because if you're not posting like a couple times a day, and I'm talking like every single day, like it's just going to get lost in the shuffle. The algorithm's going to be thrown off. Like there's all these rules you got to play by on top of everything else that's making you all stressed out in life. Like having to post on social media is a lot. It's tedious, making videos and, putting out stuff, especially in your field. I'm sure you run into problems every now and then where it's like considered sensitive content and
Absolutely.
People will either take it down, like Instagram will take it down, or they'll just hide it from your audience.
I routinely face that every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, I would say, is it's not so much about Instagram taking it down, but it's about, I would say, the trolls or my competitors that sit here and report something from that standpoint versus I could see the same content on someone who's maybe not as recognized. And I'm like, if I posted that, it would have got taken down within 10 seconds of somebody sitting here and reporting me. How do we stay on top of it? We have a team of 4 individuals in my office that their job is to help me facilitate educating the masses. I don't call it advertising or promotion. I literally sit here and do my best to educate everybody so I don't end up with 40 or 50% of the patients needing redo work rather than like, hey, find somebody that you can trust that's going to give you what you expect. Don't sit here and think you're buying a Ferrari and you're actually getting, a Ford. Something like that.
And at what point did you realize, like, I have to stick with this? Like, because there's probably times where it's like you're not getting the numbers you're looking for and it doesn't seem like it's worth the investment that you're putting into it. But once the algorithm cracks and I've always said that consistency is the key. Like, the algorithm rewards the consistency, and you obviously broken that barrier. At what point did you know, like, I have to keep at it from this business perspective on social media, like you said, educating the masses, as opposed to just being like, it's not worth the investment anymore. Let's just fizzle out. Because a lot of people out there have platforms and they fizzle out and because they didn't see the numbers right away, or at least within the first 6 months to a year doing it. So at what point did you realize, like, I'm just going to stick with this and hopefully we'll get out on the other end of this?
I think because we do it every day, and I don't do it for the numbers.
No.
Because there's times when it might be a 6-month stretch where the numbers are not as good as they used to be. And whether, because I think it is a real thing to be shadow banned on whatever platform. And I know Elon Musk let some of that out on Twitter, that they find their ways to do whatever it is that they do to say, we don't like this person. So regardless of how many followers or views you've had, that they find ways to not allow that. But like I said, I do it to help other individuals. And so part of being a doctor is helping people. And maybe some people don't see it that way, but at least if I can educate one person from making a poor decision or poor mistake or ruining their lives, because some people have lost their lives having had plastic surgery for picking the wrong circumstances and more about money. that at least I've done some good, even if I haven't physically touched that individual by doing surgery on them.
Have you seen that within the last decade of work? People who have either lost their lives or like had a significantly bad surgery that almost ruined their lives?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, some of the things that I've seen, and not to throw shade on, medical tourism. That's where people travel outside of the country to have surgery. Just because, if you think about it, if the minimum wage here is $13 and the minimum wage, let's say in another country, is 50 cents, they could substantially charge substantially less. Or a pair of implants is $900 in the U.S. and overseas is $100. So all of a sudden the cost of, and no malpractice insurance or no guidelines for the most part, that people can kind of do anything. And over there, the way they generate money, or even what we call chop shops here in the U.S., is it's a volumes game. It's Walmart makes money by selling lots of inexpensive things versus, Neiman Marcus or Tiffany's will only have to sell one expensive thing to kind of make the same.
I mean, that's almost dangerous in a sense, overseas. Like you made the comparison there of like 13 minimum wage here, $13 compared to like 50 cents somewhere else. It's like the motivations vary, I feel like. And that's a pretty big thing to get yourself into. And if you're not properly motivated and you're not on the same page with the clientele, like you're really messing with someone's well-being there almost. And like you don't even care.
And it's the doctors that do surgery do care about the patients, but the reality is they care for such a short, brief period of time that you're like a factory line. It's like, okay, who's next? Okay, great. And it's like, okay, what do you want? Okay, great. And then that's it. There's no actual thought, or because it's a numbers game. It's like you need to make money as whoever you are, and you're just like, great, I need to do 6 of these today, and if I can do 7, great, that's more. So it's just it always boils down to a numbers game.
Have you ever had a client that you specifically remember, like there's pressure here, I want this to be done really well, whether it had been someone that you knew of heading in, or, anybody that you look back at and say, like, I really need to do a good job on this one. Like you really thought about it, like almost overthought about it.
I would say I do that for every patient, but
you're a good man.
But I think part of that is it's ingrained when you go through the training that people see what you're doing. There's no room for error. Like, oh, okay, well, we're doing something inside your intestines. Like, who's ever going to see that? You just see the scar on the outside. Versus everything that we do for the most part is a visual thing. So you kind of have to always be on top of your game. But of course, there's always, celebrities that you might operate on, and you're like, gosh, the pressure. Or sometimes we have certain individuals that are in the movie industry where they don't wear clothes. So whatever you're doing is visualized by millions of people. So it's, there's a certain level of stress, so to speak, but the more you do it, the less stressful it becomes.
I believe that, the more experience you have, it's just like, oh, it's a daily routine. And if you're confident in it, then nothing's going to shake you in that sense. Is there, I'm obviously 100% sure that there's patient and doctor confidentiality there, but like any celebrities that you've worked on that you look at and be like, oh, that's my work up on the screen right there.
A couple of times for me, but obviously, from that standpoint, I don't sit here and say that I've operated on anybody famous other than, I think every one of my patients wants to be famous, at least to their significant other.
I believe it.
So.
And that's the only person that you should be famous for, try to be famous for, is your significant other.
Yep.
That's an interesting way of looking at it.
At least yourself, right?
Yeah. If you look good, you feel good, right?
Absolutely.
Are you a father?
I am.
What do you say to your kids when it comes to this stuff? Because these are like long hours. It's a very high stress job. Like, what do you think they see, and what do you want them to see when it comes to your profession?
I want them to know that my job is to help people. How I do it may be different than maybe other providers or other physicians or other healthcare workers. Because everybody looks at plastic surgeons like, oh, that's not a real doctor or a real surgeon from that standpoint. But we help people feel better about themselves. And, my simplification of what it is that I do is I say I am a surgical psychologist. I help people feel better with their eyes of what they look at in the mirror, which helps them up here.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm all for that, like the way you feel about yourself, first and foremost, allows you to do just about anything you want in the world, and it really sets the tone. Like if you wake up in the morning and you're not feeling good, it's not going to be a great day, no matter how, mentally charged you are to change that. If there's something off, there's something off.
Absolutely. And I think, when you're able to look at yourself and feel like, God, I look better. But then it's also when maybe some other people start noticing, God, you look better.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's
further,
a confidence
that's
boost.
positive reinforcement that you're like, wow, I do look good.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden you just feel more motivated about anything and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy, and you should only, truly admire the way you feel about yourself. But like when you hear it from someone else, it's like, okay, like, all right, here we go. I'm feeling a little bit better, that giddy up almost, like you feel a lot better.
Yeah, and I think I get the luxury of seeing this on some individuals that walk in and they're so self-conscious and they're like, nobody's ever seen me like this except my significant other. And then after surgery, they walk in and they're like full Monty, ready to show the world like how their confidence just totally changes. And they're just grateful that this is who they saw themselves at, but couldn't physically see it. And now that they physically see it, they're like different individuals.
Now, when people come in looking to change something about themselves, do they have something drawn up, like a specific way they want it to look? I'm sure you already have like an outline of like, this is what it's going to look like based on, what you're asking for.
I think most people have an idea, but part of my job is also to set expectations. If you're 300 pounds and you want to look like you're Kylie Jenner and 120 pounds or 90 pounds, that's not realistic. But I think we can get you to be your own kind of beautiful, so to speak, and get you to be as good of a version of you as I can make you.
Now, can people, because again, I'm novice when it comes to this stuff, can people ask to just lose a ton of weight in that regard, or just get it sucked out of you?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, every time the legal limit of taking weight off of somebody is you can physically safely remove 11 pounds of fat per surgery, which you're like, 11 pounds doesn't seem like a lot. But when you imagine a pound of steak, 11 times over
pounds.
That you take off a human being in a matter of hours, that's a lot.
Especially when it's like, because I don't want to compare and contrast, like, having like a certain fitness plan or routine and diet to lose that, as opposed to getting it almost like cut out of you.
Correct.
Like it's weird for your body to adjust to that almost.
Yeah, and I think, I tell everybody, diet and exercise is free. You don't have to come see me for this. But sometimes certain individuals, for whatever medical conditions or problems they have, they're like, they go to the gym 4 days a week and they just can't lose any more weight. So this is where I come in and I do my best to help them. But when I talk to somebody, I'm like, you have this option. And of course, you can literally sit here and just go to the gym, diet and exercise, it'll get better. The one thing that I think sometimes people don't understand, diet and exercise does not get rid of loose skin. It just doesn't. It's a rubber band that's been overstretched and you're like, okay, well, I'll just give it some time or put it in the sun or do something and it'll tighten up. It doesn't work that way. And that's where plastic surgery will always have a place until we can figure out a pill or something that causes your skin to shrink.
And do you see that more so in older people or just people that are like, quote unquote, overweight? Or
I think it depends, because I've seen people that are 18 years old who used to weigh 300 pounds and now they're like 150 pounds. And so now they got this extra skin and they don't want to live the rest of their lives that way. Yet I see older individuals that in their mid 50s or 60s now that lost a lot of weight and they're like, gosh, I don't want to live my rest of my life being this way. So it's kind of open to, I guess, the masses.
What's the strangest type of surgery that you've kind of operated on? Maybe not in the sense of like it being completely strange, but like someone who were just like, oh, like you internally are like, they look fine. Like, I don't understand why they want to do this.
I think every single body part I've had that realization. But the hardest part about what I do is it's not about what I see. It's about what you or they see.
Yeah.
I have plenty of women that have large breasts that all they want in their life is small breast. And I have plenty of women that have small breasts that all they want is large breast. Or any other body part you can imagine. There's a spectrum of individuals in terms of what their goals and desires are. And part of it is for me not to project. It's for me to be able to offer them something that I can do safely that's not going to disfigure them within reason, because somebody might come in with, breast is the easiest example. They come in with beautiful breasts that could be on any cover of a magazine. They're like, I want them bigger. I'm like, they're perfect. But that's my opinion, not their opinion. They're like, I just want them bigger. And people are like, well, you shouldn't do that. They're fine the way they are. But then why is it okay for somebody who has large breasts to come in and be like, okay, yeah, we'll make them smaller. And people don't even second guess that. They're like, oh, those are big. But we're all putting our own preconceived notions of what is right for somebody or somebody else when it's not our place. It's our place to give them support in what it is that we feel they need, unless it's going to harm them.
And what's the routine for you mentally there when you do see that and you internally are like, yeah, it's fine, but I almost have to like put myself in their soul in a sense to know what they'd want.
And usually what I do is I tell them, I said, this is my verbiage, that you are an after result for most of my patients. You are what they want to look like when they're done with surgery. And I said, everyone's starting point is different. If you're a 95 out of 100 and you're trying to get to a 99, I'll do my best to get you there. Versus if I can take an 80 and get you to a 95, they're ecstatic.
Yeah.
And part of that is, again, I can't put myself in their position because, again, some people just have a better starting point than others.
And I also feel like from the patient's perspective, like you may, be longing for a change. Like you can picture it, visualize it, right? And you wanted it for years. And then it finally happens. And it's just like doesn't feel right. You just picture in your head like, oh, like I look different now. In your head, you always wanted it. But once it actually happens, it's like almost like a reverse 180 of just like, oh man, now I got to kind of adjust to this. Have you ever had people like that where you saw like, it's going to take a long time for them to adjust to this?
I try to really set the expectation that throughout multiple visits, whether it's like, hey, you're going to have to buy all new clothes, or you understand that what you're asking for is this. And it's such a cliche to say, but be careful what you ask for, because if you get it, you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And so I try to be as upfront and honest with individuals that I don't really see it that much. Few and far between, maybe one out of like 500 patients that I'll sit here and they'll be like, oh my gosh, no, like, no. Like, I don't know what I was thinking.
And that's a tough realization to come through, because that's like years of like reteaching your brain in 1 second being like, why did I want this?
It is. It's hard. But like I said, all you can do as the doctor or the physician is try to educate them before they make that decision. But it's no different than like getting a tattoo, right? You're like, I want one. You get it. And then you're like, God, what was I thinking?
Yeah. A lot of 40-year-olds come to that realization of just like, oh my God, a snake tattoo when you were 25? Like, what were you thinking?
Yeah. But that was the thing back then, right?
I think it's still the thing today. I think a lot of people regret tattoos. Do you have any tattoos?
I actually do not.
That is a very smart man. Smart man with a smart profession. And where can we find you on social media, Dr. Scottsdale?
Well, on Instagram, you can find me at Dr. Scottsdale. On Snapchat, Dr. Scottsdale, Dr. Scottsdale. TikTok, at Dr. Scottsdale. At Facebook, at The Real Dr. Scottsdale. You can just literally Google Dr. Scottsdale, and I will populate on Google in the first page for tons of things.
You were the first guy to show up, so 2015 is when you started your social media pages, and now look at it 8 years later. Look what happens when you don't give up, right?
Yes, persistence is key.
Persistence is key. I think persistence, communication, transparency. And I think you do all three of those things very well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
And I appreciate you coming on the show today. I'm glad Mike was able to set this up for us. It is episode 602, guys. Check it out with Dr. Scottsdale. You can head over to our YouTube channel at Jack O'Hara TV. Remember to use that promo code at tickpick.com, capital OSHOW20 for $20 off your next order. Check it out, guys.